With the Presource Custom Pack program, we are helping you get the supplies that you need where you need them on the table every time, and just the consistency in that, helping you optimize the supplies with strong data and actionable insights from WaveMark. And then we do, through Presource, have a logistical offering as well. So I know that might come into play for some facilities. So all of those things coming together is really Cardinal Health as a whole.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On this vendor spotlight, we will speak with Jen Nichols, Senior Clinical Consultant with Cardinal Health Presource, and Debbie Davis, Vice President of Product and Marketing Strategy with Cardinal Health WaveMark Solutions. Really excited for this conversation today, Melanie. We're going to be talking about preference and procedure cards and how do you optimize custom packs in your operating room to create some efficiencies, some cost savings, and really what does Cardinal Health do to help make those sometimes laborious projects successful?
Absolutely. But having a team of experts who knows the process, who can help you with your packs, who can help also then reflect the accuracy of the packs in your preference cards and really help with improving that efficiency and reducing some of the waste that we experience in the operating room. But then also it can sometimes be a struggle to maintain that, and they can come alongside you to help maintain those changes. It's really an exciting process to see how it all works from the beginning and how it all comes to fruition.
All right, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back and tell you all about Cardinal Health Presource and WaveMark in just a minute with Jen Nichols and Debbie Davis.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to First Case.
Joining us now is Jen Nichols, Senior Clinical Consultant with Cardinal Health Presource, and Debbie Davis, Vice President of Product and Marketing Strategy with Cardinal Health WaveMark Solutions. That's what we're going to be talking about today, specifically around optimization in the OR and preference and procedure cards. We're going to be sharing some best practices with you all. Thank you so much for joining Melanie and I for this interview. And let's start with you, Jen. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your background and your role with Cardinal.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast, Justin and Melanie. I really appreciate the opportunity to share information about Presource. A little bit of background about me. I'm an OR nurse and clinical consultant for Cardinal Health. I've been in the healthcare industry for over 18 years, focusing on both patient care and the clinical supply chain. I've worked in several different operating rooms, from trauma facilities to ambulatory surgery centers, and I'm passionate about efficiency, and I strive to optimize patient safety and waste reduction. A few of the areas I focus on with Presource are assisting our OR sales reps with custom pack program reviews, surgical glove trials and implementations for our Protexis line, educational needs for Cardinal Health products, and new product demos. Basically, anytime our OR sales team needs clinical support, we're assisting with that. Our team is coming in to help our customers be the best for their patients.
Excellent. Well, this is, part of a 3-part series all around Presource. And so, very excited to have both you and Debbie on the show today. And Debbie, I'll allow you to introduce yourself as well. And maybe you can tell us about WaveMark specifically too.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. I've worked in the healthcare industry my entire career with a focus on product development and basically bringing innovative technologies to the market. In particular, I have a
real passion around using data and analytics to improve clinical workflows and improve patient care. And that's what's one of the things that really drew me to Cardinal Health. So I'm with Cardinal Health WaveMark. I've been here for the last 4.5 years, leading the solution development for the team. The last couple of years have been extremely fun because we've launched several new exciting innovations around inventory optimization within health systems. Our focus when we're looking at these innovations is really bringing together the supply chain team and the clinicians through optimized workflows. Our specialty is where we simplify collecting supply usage data in the procedural areas that informs the supply chain decision making and enables the best patient care by ensuring the right products available for the right patient at the right time. In the past year, we've launched several new innovations, including next generation medical consumable solution, as well as the procedure card optimizer, which we're going to talk a little bit more about today. In addition to the technology that we offer from a WaveMark perspective, we also have a full extensive team that supports our customers throughout the journey from the beginning implementation all the way through sustainability and use of our technology, basically helping them get to the outcomes that they're expecting. We were excited to celebrate our 20th year anniversary for WaveMark last year. We had a big celebration with the team, which was super fun. It's exciting and we love the fact that we have the ability to serve over 300 health systems today. One of the things I wanted to also add was that we really are enjoying this partnership within Cardinal Health with Jen and the team within Presource. And we are working together where we're harmonizing and optimizing the procedural packs in coordination with procedure cards to create the further efficiencies and savings that we'll be talking about today. But it's a great team and we really enjoy all the collaboration and interaction together.
Debbie, you could almost host this podcast because that segue was beautiful. As we kind of dive into procedure cards or preference cards, there were a couple of themes from what you were just talking about, and two that stuck out to me. One, the fact that I think health systems and especially perioperative services are just looking for good data to help them make decisions. And I know that there's, ways to reduce waste in healthcare, but it's hard to do when you don't have good data. So I loved that theme as well as, really bringing that support to the hospital, because I think hospitals are looking for more from their vendor partners now than ever to be able to navigate, kind of this new healthcare environment that we've been in over the last 3 to 4 years. And so I think both of those themes are very encouraging. And Jen, I think we should dive right into preference and procedure cards because you have a clinical background. And I know as we prepared for this, you and Melanie connected on a lot of different things, related to your experience in the operating room. But I feel like in every engagement, when we start to talk about efficiency, when it comes back to the OR, I feel like the focus goes squarely on preference and procedure cards, but that can be so difficult to maintain, especially as there's changes over time. Can you kind of just talk about your experience and what you see in your role with Cardinal, across the industry as some other challenges with, maintaining those, P cards and making sure that we're set up for success.
Definitely. And I feel like you hit the nail on the head when you said challenge, because I feel like sometimes preference cards can just be notorious in a facility. You walk in and you start talking to them about their custom packs. You start talking to them about their OR program in general, and you bring up preference cards and people kind of wince a little bit, or they say, oh, ours really need updating, or we have a stack of them right here that haven't been updated, or we have someone who goes in and updates all the time in the middle of a procedure and almost to the detriment that it's too much. They're updating when it's not necessary. So I feel like they're a little bit notorious in that way where it's something that you have to have. It's basically your physician's recipe card for everything that they want for that procedure. It's going to be the medications that they need. It's going to be the supplies they need. It's going to be the dressings they need. It's going to be the positioning that they need that patient to be in. So it's essentially their recipe for how they need to be able to come together with the team in the room and have a successful surgery, just to take care of that patient in the best way possible. So when you go into a facility and in my role, I'm going into multiple facilities for months. So I see a lot of different things out there in our customer base. And what we're doing is coming in and looking at the custom pack program and saying, okay, if we at least get your custom pack right. So if you go in and you're going to have a total hip procedure, you're going to open up that custom pack on the back table, and it's going to be as many of the common items as it possibly can be to do a total hip procedure. And you want that to be kind of across the board. You want all the orthopedic physicians to be using the same total hip pack. We don't need a Dr. Jones hip pack, a Dr. Smith hip pack. We want there to be one total hip pack. So you have to take into consideration, what do Dr. Jones and what do Dr. Smith need for their total hip? So we look at multiple physicians. When we go in, we do observation in the rooms. We see what they're using in each room, and we see what are the commonalities. How can we make this total hip pack best for everyone using it? And then part of that incorporates, let's get rid of any waste that's in there. Are you always throwing an extra 3/4 sheet away because you don't need it? Are there too many of something? Let's get rid of the waste. And then let's bring in products that you're pulling from the shelf 80 to 90% of the time that you're opening single sterilely. Let's get those put into your custom pack. So there's less time. You're not opening that. There's not a chance of dropping it. There's not a chance of contaminating it. So that's kind of what I see out there. But preference cards are definitely a big part of it. So we're trying in Presource to at least make the custom pack as robust as it can be without adding things that don't need to be there.
I think that's really important to look at what you need and what everybody typically is using, what we're always opening, and also what we don't need. Because in my own experience, I always go back to these 2 foot and ankle surgeons that I worked with, and we had a foot and ankle pack, but it was optimized for one of the foot and ankle surgeons, and the other surgeon, it didn't work for him at all. And the surgeon who it didn't really work for was here 2 days a week. And the surgeon that it did work for, because he was a little more high maintenance, a little more squealy, he was only there 1 day a week. But every time we opened the pack for the guy that was there 2 days a week, I was actually trying to think through this last night just to think of how many things we threw away. But I think we threw away 10 to 12 items every single time we opened a pack for his case. And then I'm looking, okay, so he's there 2 days a week. We're throwing this away for 8 to 10 cases a week. Why are we wasting so much stuff? And I went and talked to our Cardinal rep, and they helped us optimize that pack to turn it into something that actually worked for both surgeons so that we had what we needed for both cases. And we reduced so much waste by not having a pack that didn't work for both surgeons. So it really is important to sit and look at not only what's in the pack, but also what are we not using so that we can not sit and waste so many supplies and have something that works every time we open it. So I like that approach to the whole picture when you're looking at a pack.
Yeah, I think it's a great call out, and I love your example there, Melanie. It's really all about having the right balance. While our team was completing a recent literature review on the impact of procedure cards, we actually found a stat sharing that procedure cards generally contain 20 to 40% more supplies than are really needed for a case. And in addition to the potential that this causes for waste, there's also unused products that have an impact on post-surgical staff workflows. In the best case scenario, the unused products are not wasted, but instead they're returned and restocked by the clinicians or supply chain staff. However, even this still has significant implications on time spent managing supplies, removing unused products from patient records, and adjusting the usage in the inventory system, which leaves the department with staff inefficiencies and wasted time that could better be utilized by providing better patient care. So it's really important to keep that balance you talked about in mind. While ORs need to adjust procedure cards to help reduce the waste, you also don't want to cut down too much and then have clinicians running to retrieve items mid-surgery. That would be a bad thing. So as Jen was mentioning, it's really important to observe what's truly needed and look at the accurate usage data and analytics to guide decision-making when it comes to updating the procedure cards.
What are some of the barriers to optimization? Cause, like Melanie, you kind of went forward and, kind of helped take charge of that and work with the Cardinal rep to pull that together. But Are there some things that really make this difficult? Like, let's say, somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh, we know what we need to do. We just never do it, right? Those are the kinds of barriers, Jen, I'm kind of talking about, because I think everybody knows what sort of needs to be done, but yet we still struggle to actually execute in a lot of cases, many facilities across the country on it. What do you think are some of those barriers?
So I think just taking the time, like Melanie said, to reach out to your Cardinal rep and make sure that you have someone available to come in and assist with this. A lot of times our sales team really fights to have our clinical team come in with them so they can make this more collaborative. They want someone who can go in and talk the talk, right? I worked in the operating room. I still do. I want to be able to make that team most efficient for their patient. So my goal is always get the team what they need and get them what they want. I'm not pushing extra products to be put in the pack. I'm saying, what are you using? How can we make this best for your program? I might make suggestions from things I've seen at other facilities or things I've done in my own practice. I always tell the customer, you can take or leave those suggestions however you want. It's really all about you and making your program the best. So I think one of the challenges is just definitely arranging a time when this can be done. The clinician and the sales rep will come in and we'll meet at your first huddle, explain who we are, what we're doing, explain to the staff that we know our way around the room. We're not going to contaminate anything. We intend on being in there before any patients come in, unless, of course, they need assistance with draping or have any questions about anything, then I can obviously step back in when needed. But we like to get in as they're opening the pack so we can observe. I mean, it's so much better to see people in action opening these custom packs versus sitting down in a room with a piece of paper and going over a list of supplies, because I can watch the scrub tech set up their table and I can see, oh, they threw this off or they set that aside or they asked someone to open, 3 more 3/4 sheets. Maybe we need to add 2 more to the pack and then you add that third one as needed. I like to look at gown counts, how many gowns are in there versus how many people will be scrubbed up, what AMI level of the gown is in the pack. So all of those things are taken into consideration, but it's best for us to be in the room and observe these things. So the biggest challenge, I think, is just setting that up with the customer ahead of time, making sure that's a week when the right people will be there. You'll have a nice, diverse caseload. How can we best be utilized while we're on site together? And then there's some prep work that goes into it beforehand and afterward. But when we're on site, we want to be in those rooms, talking to staff, observing, and then kind of rounding out with a service lead after the fact and saying, okay, I spoke with these 4 people in these couple rooms and we observed Dr. So-and-so's case. These are the things that we took away. How do you feel about it? What would you like to see different with the pack based on some of this feedback?
I heard loud and clear about how the Presource pack program eliminates waste and how that can increase efficiency. Melanie, you kind of teed that up really well, and especially around the waste and having the right supplies, in the custom pack, but also, you got to be driving savings because, throwing away product that's not being utilized, that absolutely has to equate to cost reduction. But I feel like these clinical led reviews are really important because, you're kind of bringing a supply chain perspective into the clinical setting. And so you have a clinician that's sort of helping guide through that process and even bridge maybe some of those supply chain concepts into that clinical environment to help, ensure some success there. I think that's really, really critical. Debbie, were you going to add something there?
Yeah, I was actually. When you asked about barriers, I was thinking about the experience that we have also when talking with our customers and some of the challenges they face. They all are challenged with having accurate preference cards and all the things that are a result of that. But some of the barriers are not having that accurate data. Sometimes they're like, we're not ready to start fixing our preference cards because we don't have the data to do it. The other piece is that they don't always have the staff. So probably the 2 biggest hurdles we hear about is I don't have accurate data to help me fix these, and I don't have the staff to focus on doing it. So those are some of the things that we think about in terms of helping customers overcome those challenges.
I also think about sustainability of the program, because I was just highlighting how important I think it is, to have a partner that's bringing in some clinicians to do that clinical led review. But what happens after you set it up, right? Every time you set up a good program, if you take your eye off the prize, it just starts to kind of deteriorate over time. It's got a shelf life, if you will, of how long, that's accurate. And really everything you just said about the data, Debbie, I think is how you're able to make sure that the program continues to work as changes in organizations happen. And Jen, I don't know if you want to speak to that or maybe some of the logistics around maintaining the program. Like once you've set it up and you've done this and you've really identified and achieved some of that savings, how do you make sure that that just keeps happening?
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things I wanted to mention, just playing off Debbie a little bit, was the staffing issue. So I've worked at facilities where there might be an inbox full of preference cards that need to be updated, and maybe only certain people are trained to update those preference cards. You don't want everyone in the whole OR to be able to do that, because then you don't always know that the appropriate changes are being made. So a lot of times people will default that to maybe their team lead for that service line, and that person had 3 call-offs today, so they're in a room. So they like, those things just keep piling up. But one thing to mention after we come in and do all of the optimization of the custom packs is that someone then at that point will need to go in and update the preference cards, because if we've now added 4 or 5 items that they're consistently pulling from the shelf that come up from case pick and come up in that case cart together, now those items no longer need to be picked. So if they continue to come up on the case cart, they're going to continue to get sent back and forth. They're just going to make this journey through the hospital when they were actually never needed. So our sales team does a great job of giving the customer kind of a forecast of how many packs they have left of their old pack. And then they can bleed that supply down. And then as soon as they get close to the end, that's when we start reminding them, okay, this is the point where you would want to go in, update your preference card, make sure that you have removed the supplies that we've now added to the pack. And then another thing I wanted to mention was when you talked about cost, by adding product from our system in bulk non-sterile, so it gets all sterilized together with the pack, things that they're pulling off the shelf that are single sterile typically cost more money. So by adding items to the pack, they're also making a savings in that way as well. So I just wanted to throw that in because you did mention not just the waste reduction, but also by adding bulk non-sterile items to the pack to get sterilized with the whole pack, you eliminate the excess packaging from the single sterile item and you eliminate some of that cost as well.
Yeah, I was blown away going back to that example that I gave. It just our overall cost savings. Like you said, because I don't think I actually put together that when you put it in a pack and sterilize it all together versus the single sterile, that it's going to cost less that way and save you even more money. One of the other things, because I was a service line coordinator and we do have so much going on, and I love that you brought up the fact that, yeah, we might not can get to our pref card updates because we are in a room or we're in staffing or we've got so many other things pulling on us. I do think it's a great idea to only have designated people updating your pref cards, because you don't want, Jane Doe, who worked with Dr. So-and-so one time, to go in and update the pref card with all this weird stuff, which I have had happen, by the way. And then it just completely messes everything up. But having that gatekeeper for the pref card is great until you do have problems with staffing or you do have difficulty getting them updated. So those reminders from our Cardinal team that say, hey, remember your pref card needs to be updated to reflect the changes in your pack. It's very simple. But because you are running around sometimes with your hair on fire in the OR and you don't think about it, getting that card updated to accurately reflect your new pack really does help to continue the efficiency, continue the savings, continue the updates to your pref card. And it was those simple reminders for me that just really, oh yeah, I need to do that. And then I would get it done to make sure we weren't pulling things that we didn't need. But I do have a question for you, Jen or Debbie, either one. When you are implementing these pack changes, you go in, you observe, and you make all these recommendations. Do you ever get any pushback from clinicians who are like, oh, we have to have that. If it's not in our pack, they're just going to yell, or, any type of fear of change when it comes to changing those procedure packs?
In general, I find that the staff is usually really excited about these changes. I would say 90 to 95% of the time when we come in for a program review like this, we get very welcome reception. They say, we're so glad you're here. This needed to be done so long ago. Or, with COVID in there for a few years, people weren't bringing in vendors. They weren't bringing in sales reps. So a lot of times some of these things maybe were on the calendar to get scheduled and then never happened, or staffing changes all the time and people come and go, or they have travelers and they say, well, don't talk to the traveler because they're not going to know what we need on an everyday basis.
Right.
But like I said, for the most part, we find that people are really engaged for this as long as we can get them out of the rooms and talk to them. So like you said, even if you were a service line coordinator, sometimes you would be in the rooms because you had call-offs, or you would be getting supplies ready for a big case that was coming up, and you might not be available. So we just try and do as much observation as we can with the room and talk to the staff in the room and ask, who should we talk to for a neuro case? Or who do you want us to talk to with ortho cases? Or, people might self-proclaim like, I'm the person you need to talk to. Or you find other people who say, don't ask me any questions. I don't want to be a part of this.
Or they say, don't ask that person any questions.
Yes, right? I get a lot of that too. Yeah, don't ask that person. Because again, that might be the person that changes the preference card in the middle of the case because they used one thing one time.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's usually a really collaborative and very well received week when we're on site together, because we're there to make the PAC program better for your staff. It's not about us. It's about you and being able to provide for your patients in the best way that you can and the most efficiently and cost effectively.
I think one of the other things that helps drive those kind of changes is when you put the analytics in front of the clinicians, especially the physicians. When you show that in the last 50 cases, the last 50 times that they did the procedure, they never used these products that were on the pick list, then it's an easier discussion to say, let's remove them, than if you're, using manual data or just past experience or the last couple procedures. So the actual data really does make a difference, and it drives those really strong, credible conversations between the supply chain, the clinical leaders, and the physicians.
Debbie, you really do have this down to an art form, because you're reading my mind and segueing before I even do it. You're a natural. You're going to have to get your own podcast. I wanted to dive into the data because, I feel like that's something that we alluded to is so critical to success, right? But we haven't really dove into how you all, get that data, work with that data, and use it to drive decision making and invalidate the data, I think is probably another big part of that too. So I know that kind of brings us to the WaveMark procedure card optimizer, Debbie. And so I'd like you to leap right off of that and kind of tell us more about WaveMark now that we're, kind of diving into the data component.
All right. Great. Thank you. We've actually developed an enhanced OR solution where we have an automated case pick process that we collect data. It feeds into our procedure card optimizer tool, which I'll just call PCO from this point forward, just to shorten how long it is. That tool then provides recommendations to ensure the accuracy of the preference cards and enable those conversations that we were just talking about. By providing these recommendations, we're actually able to ensure that the products that are needed for the procedures are actually available. It reduces waste for products that are opened, discarded, and it improves the staff efficiencies with a more accurate pick process, as well as less returns for products that are unused during the case. So there's lots of benefits to using this data to update and get more accurate preference cards. The way that we go about it with our tools is really through 4 different steps. So the first step is what we call our data collection. And today, and as Jen talked about some of the processes, there's very disconnected sources for data and multiple sources. And so they're not all really brought together, and analytics run on them to provide recommendations. And so what our tool does is basically bring all that data together into one place. And so we're integrating with the EMR to pull the pick list into our application. We provide an automated workflow for the techs as they go and pick all the products for the case. This is where we're actually capturing what products are actually picked versus just assuming that what was on the pick list was actually picked for the case. And then our solution captures the usage data at what we like to call the moment of care, where we're basically the clinicians are scanning and tracking all data that's used and documenting it in our solution that integrates with the EMR. And as part of that, we're also documenting any products that might be opened and not used or wasted. So the second step is we take all of that data, we run analytics. So our predictive analytics looks at the different data sets and provides insights on how to optimize and drive really greater accuracy of the cards. So this is where the types of recommendations we come up with are things to add to the card or remove from the card or take them from the open status to a hold or PRN status. Also look to standardize across different physicians or across different procedures. And in Jen's discussion, she gave lots of examples of situations where you want to add an item or where there's items that should be removed because they're wasted. One additional benefit of the collaboration that we have within Cardinal Health across our businesses and with Presource team and WaveMark is that through the fully integrated solution, we're able to identify new products that might need to be added to the preference card, but instead of adding them to the card, we add them to the kit, and we're ensuring that we're not double counting it. And so that integrated solution really adds a lot of benefit to the health systems. The third step is what we just talked about, which is acting on the recommendations. So now that you have really strong, accurate, credible data, this is where the staff, the clinical, surgical, supply chain leaders can all come together with the data from the tool and review the different recommendations. And, some of the recommendations may be, hey, we don't use that product, but we just need to have it just in case. So instead of removing it, we're going to move it from an open to a hold or PRN status. And in other cases, there's that example I talked about where in the last 50 cases, this product was never used. And so the recommendation is to remove it. And people feel more comfortable about removing it because there's that data that goes back, for a significant number of procedures that it wasn't used. And so they will then agree on what changes need to be made to the preference cards. But then that gets to what Jen was talking about, which is that challenge in updating and maintaining, and Melanie touched on it too. It's having that staff that's dedicated to updating and sustaining the cards and having a process that's, once these decisions are made, the updates are then made to the preference card in a timely manner so that they're not stagnant or the changes become old and irrelevant. So it's important that not only you have this dedicated resource to update and maintain the preference cards, but a consistent process for doing that on a regular basis. And in addition to the tools, we also offer the different services to support the health systems and the clinical teams with additional resources to support putting in place the process and helping update and sustain the preference cards. So that's at least gives you a little bit of an overview of the new tools that we've put out from a WaveMark perspective and how we collaborate with the Presource team.
Well, I'm hearing some real common themes, from Presource and WaveMark, which is efficiency, time savings, and creating more time for clinicians to focus on the patient, right? Instead of the supplies, which I think is pretty critical. And then also making sure that you have the products available that you need. There's also this support mechanism for the staff who, a lot of cases, let's be real. You mentioned travelers, Jen, we can be understaffed in many cases. And so there may even be somebody who wants to champion a project like this, but actually identifying the time to execute, having your team be able to go in and support that with clinical expertise, so critical. And then, ultimately reducing some waste there. So Jen, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but there's clearly a lot of overlap in terms of like the value that's delivered to your customers.
Exactly. With the Presource Custom Pack program, we are helping you get the supplies that you need where you need them on the table every time, and just the consistency in that, helping you optimize the supplies with strong data and actionable insights from WaveMark. And then we do, through Presource, have a logistical offering as well. So I know that might come into play for some facilities if they're changing custom packs around a little bit, they might become a little bit more robust, or they might become a little smaller. And even just the placement of those items in the core or down in central sterile might need some revision. We have some logistical offerings to help people really be able to place all those items appropriately so they're stored correctly and the pack's not going to slide across a rack and possibly rip the packaging. So all of those things coming together is really Cardinal Health as a whole.
All right, Debbie, we're going to tie this up in a nice bow. I would love for you to share with us a recent case study. So if you want to give us some details around that and some real world application to everything we're talking about your programs today.
Sure. So we partnered with a large health system on the West Coast. It was interesting as we went out and did some observational studies first. We observed a lot of the inefficiencies that Jen described earlier and the challenges with preference cards. One of the things I remember the most was going up and down in the elevators and seeing huge carts of items, supplies that were not used in the cases and had to be returned to the floors. And in many cases, they don't even return them. They just end up being waste. So we started a study. They needed help cleaning up their preference cards and reducing the significant waste and the staff efficiencies we talked about earlier. So we worked with the team, put in place the new process and tools that I described earlier. We did it within a small sample in a single department. And with the recommendations out of our solution on just 7 procedure cards, the savings opportunity was $70,000 per year. So if you take that and extrapolate it across an entire health system with thousands of cards, you could see how the savings would add up significantly. Just a great collaboration and outcome for that particular health system.
All right, Debbie. Well, I think that's a fantastic case study. And I like when we kind of take some of the concepts that we're discussing in these, podcasts, but then really talk about how you've actually done it out there in the field and give some details, because I think people that are listening, and Jen, you also did a really nice job from your firsthand experience working in the OR, like painting that picture. But I think it's important for people to conceptualize what this might do to transform how they deliver patient care in their operating rooms across the country. So I want to thank you both so much for coming on the show today. And I do want to just kind of remind everybody that's listening, you can reach out to your Cardinal Health representative to optimize your OR today. We're going to have a link in the description for this episode that'll get you pointed in the right direction. And Debbie, we'll start with you. Any final thoughts? And also thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, just thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity. And it's been great chatting with everybody here.
And Jen, thank you as well. You did a nice job today kind of really talking about, what it's like to really collaborate, and go in there and I would say get your hands dirty with the project and really have some firsthand observations. I just think that's such a wonderful program and so important and key to success, when you're partnering with your customers. So any final thoughts from you as well?
I think what you said about really getting in there and getting your hands dirty is great, because we, like I said, really want to be in the rooms and observing your staff as they're working and making the best recommendations possible by seeing what's actually happening in the rooms. So that's a great point that you made there, Justin. And Melanie, I appreciate your insights as well, and just being able to bounce back and forth with you on some things, because it's just, I feel like ORs are the same everywhere you go, and you have the same people in all the different ORs. They just have a different name. So it's really nice to be able to talk that talk with people, which is why I think bringing in a clinician for these program reviews is so helpful, because I can come in and I am not saying I know everything, but it's certainly nice to be able to talk to people, talk business with an OR nurse when you're in the OR. So just thank you guys for the opportunity to be on the podcast and share what Cardinal Health has to offer.
That was Jen Nichols, Senior Clinical Consultant with Cardinal Health Presource, and Debbie Davis, Vice President of Product and Marketing Strategy with Cardinal Health WaveMark Solutions. Really had two different conversations, one around Presource and one around WaveMark, but both honed in on optimization in the operating room with preference and procedure cards. We talked about some best practices. We talked about challenges that exist in the industry, but there is a clear cost savings, waste reduction. I'd even say responsibility to the environment by trying to create these types of efficiencies. And I can't emphasize enough how important I think those clinical led reviews are for these engagements. I mean, there's a reason that Jen said, you asked that question, Melanie, where you were like, hey, do you ever run into resistance? I mean, I think one of the major reasons that they don't is because they have a clinician who can talk the language and really, sort of translate some of these supply chain concepts to the folks that are delivering the patient care as clinicians every single day, and really making that process so much smoother, because they're doing a lot of legwork with that observation, but they're observing through a clinician's mind who has the supply chain sort of understanding to create, the kind of efficiencies with these packs.
Right. And somebody who has been there, somebody who understands, somebody who can go into an operating room and knows not to contaminate everything while they're watching, but then can also actually knows those products and knows what they're doing. It really helps to ensure that accuracy in our packs, accuracy in our pref cards, the accuracy that comes from observing what's going on and changing and adapting to how we are working in our operating rooms, then help streamline that process, bring those efficiencies, and reduce the different costs that we might be accruing just because we aren't as accurate as we could be.
Yep. Well, you need good data to do it. And that's where WaveMark comes in. Debbie did a really nice job of outlining that program and the importance of data. Who knows? Maybe you'll hear her on a future episode of the First Case podcast. But for today, we're going to wrap up. And I do want to remind everyone that you can reach out to your Cardinal Health rep to optimize your OR today. There'll be links in the description of this podcast as well. And on behalf of Melanie and myself, thanks for listening to this vendor spotlight on First Case.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.